Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn chapter 5 India, that is Bharat, from your social science textbook. In this video I'll be covering each and every line from the chapter so you don't miss anything important. Make sure to keep your notebook and pen ready and take notes while watching. This will help you remember the concepts better. I will explain the concepts clearly and you can pause or rewind any time to write things down. So let's begin. In India, at a very early time, the spiritual and cultural unity was made complete and became the very stuff of the life of all this great surge of humanity between the Himalayas and the two seas. A quote by Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo was a great freedom fighter, poet, and spiritual leader of India. He first worked to free India from British rule, but later focused on teaching about peace, yoga, and inner growth. Sri Aurobindo also started an ashram in Pondicherry, where many people came to learn from him. This quote tells us that a long time ago, India became united through common spiritual beliefs and cultural traditions. People from the Himalayas in the north to the seas in the south shared similar values, festivals, and ways of life. This unity became a natural part of everyday life for everyone. It helped make India feel like one big family, even though people lived in different regions. Here figure 5.1 shows a scene from rural India about 2300 years ago, north gate of the Great Sanchi Stupa. This is a carving or sculpture found on the north gate of the Great Stupa at Sanchi. A stupa is a dome-shaped structure that is used as a Buddhist shrine. This carving shows a scene from rural India, which shows how people lived in villages long ago. So, the big questions are, how do we define India? When we say define India, we will learn to describe what India is in a clear way. That is, what does India mean today as a country? What were the ancient names for India? What did people in the past call the land we now call India? So, we will learn the answers of these questions in this chapter. Today, the India we know is a modern nation with defined borders, defined states, and a known population. However, it was very different 500 years ago, 2000 years ago, or even 5000 years ago. This region of the world, which we often call the Indian subcontinent, has had many different names and shifting boundaries. We can learn about India's past and evolution from many different sources. Let us explore. So, today India is a modern country. It has clear borders, many states, and a large population. But India was not always like this. 500 years ago, 2000 years ago, or even 5000 years ago, the land we now call India looked very different. This region is often called the Indian subcontinent. It includes not just India but also countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. Over time, this region has had many names and its boundaries have changed. To understand how India changed over time, we study history. Think about it. Consider the physical map of the Indian subcontinent at the start of the chapter. What are its natural boundaries that you can make out? So, the physical map here given is the old map of this Indian subcontinent. Here we can see the natural boundaries like Himalayas in the north. These tall mountains form a natural wall that separates India from the countries like China and Nepal. Indian Ocean in the south. It surrounds the southern part of the subcontinent. The Arabian Sea in the west. This sea forms a boundary along India's western coast. The Bay of Bengal in the east. It borders the eastern side of the subcontinent. In the course of history, India has been called by many names, both by its inhabitants and by visitors from outside. These names come to us from ancient texts, accounts of travelers and pilgrims, and inscriptions. Inhabitants, people who live in a particular place. So, this means over a long period of time, from ancient times to now, India did not always have one name. It had different names at different times in history. Some names are given by the people who lived in India, and some were given by foreigners like travelers, traders, and rulers who came from other countries. How Indians named India. The Rig Veda is India's most ancient text, as we will see in chapter 7. It is several thousand years old. It gives the northwest region of the subcontinent the name Sapta Sindhava, that is, the land of the 7 rivers. The word Sindhava comes from Sindhu, which refers to the Indus River or at times to a river in general. So, what is Rig Veda? The Rig Veda is the oldest book from India. It was written thousands of years ago and is very important for understanding ancient Indian history and culture. What does it say about the northwest region? The Rig Veda, the northwest part of the Indian subcontinent is called Sapta Sindhava, which means land of the 7 rivers. And the word Sindhava comes from Sindhu, which usually means the Indus River, one of the biggest rivers in the region. Sometimes Sindhu can also mean any river. In figure 5.3, we can see the northwest region of the Indian subcontinent. Moving on in time, we see names for other parts of India appear in the literature. The Mahabharata is one of the India's most famous texts. We read it about in the theme Our Cultural Heritage and Knowledge Traditions. Interestingly, it lists many regions such as Kashmira, more or less today's Kashmir, Kurukshetra, parts of Haryana today, Vanga, parts of Bengal, Prakyodisha, roughly today's Assam, Kachcha, today's Kutch, Kerala, more or less today's Kerala, and so on. So, as time passed, different parts of India were called by different names. These names are found in old books and stories. One very famous ancient book is the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata talks about many different regions or areas of India like Kashmira, which is about the same as today's Kashmir. Kurukshetra, a part of today's Haryana. Vanga, parts of Bengal. Prakyodisha, roughly today's Assam. Kachcha, which is today's Kutch in Gujarat. Kerala, which is almost the same as today's Kerala. Do you recognize the names of any regions given in the map figure 5.4 on page 79? List the ones that you have heard of. Figure 5.4, map of a few regions listed in the Mahabharata. Many of them are also mentioned in the text as kingdoms. You do not need to remember those regions, but notice how they cover the entire geography of the subcontinent. So, this map shows regions mentioned in the Mahabharata. Many of these regions were actually kingdoms, that is, places ruled by kings. These places cover almost the entire Indian subcontinent. But when do we come across a name for the entire Indian subcontinent? Because ancient Indian texts are difficult to date, this is not an easy question to answer. The Mahabharata uses the terms Bharatavarsha and Jambudvipa, and scholars generally agree that this long poem was written from a few centuries BCE onward. So when did people start calling the whole big area by one name? It's not an easy question to answer because the ancient Indian books are very old and it is hard to know exactly when they were written. The Mahabharata uses names like Bharatavarsha and Jambudvipa. Scholars means experts who study history think that Mahabharata was written a few hundred years before the Common Era, that is BCE, which means more than 2000 years ago. The first term, Bharatavarsha, clearly extends to the entire subcontinent and the text includes the names of numerous rivers and peoples. Bharatavarsha means the country of the Bharatas. Bharata is a name that first appears in the Rig Veda, where it refers to one of the main Vedic groups of people. In later literature, several kings named Bharata are mentioned. The first name Bharatavarsha clearly means the whole Indian subcontinent, that is, the big land that includes many regions. Bharatavarsha means the country of the Bharatas. The name Bharata first appears in the Rig Veda, which is one of the India's oldest texts. There it refers to a big group of people called Vedic people. Later, stories and books mention several kings named Bharata, showing how important this name was in history. The second term, Jambudvipa, means the island of the fruit of the jamun tree. This is indeed a common tree native to India, also called jambul tree, Malabar plum tree, etc. Jambudvipa came to mean the Indian subcontinent. The second name for India is Jambudvipa. Jambudvipa means the island of the fruit of the jamun tree. The jamun tree is a common tree in India that grows juicy purple black fruits. The tree is also called the jambul tree or Malabar plum tree. Over time, the word Jambudvipa came to mean the whole Indian subcontinent. In fact, we get a good clue from an Indian emperor. His name is Ashoka and we will meet him later. For now, we can take his date to be about 250 BCE. As we will see, he left us many inscriptions. In one of them, he used the same name Jambudvipa to describe the whole of India, which at that time include what is today Bangladesh, Pakistan as well as parts of Afghanistan. So, a very important Indian emperor named Ashoka lived around 250 BC. Emperor Ashoka left behind many inscriptions. In one of his inscriptions, he called the whole land Jambudvipa. At that time, India included not just present-day India, but also Bangladesh, Pakistan and parts of Afghanistan. A few centuries later, Bharata became the name generally used for the Indian subcontinent. For instance, in an ancient text called the Vishnu Purana, we read Uttaram yat samudrasya himadraskeva dakshinam varsham tad bharatam nama. The country that lies north of the ocean and south of the snowy mountains is called Bharata. After a few hundred years, the name Bharata became the common name for the entire Indian subcontinent. For example, in an old book called the Vishnu Purana, this name is used to describe the whole region. The verse from the Vishnu Purana says north of the ocean. This means the land is above, to the north of the Indian Ocean, and south of the snowy mountains. This refers to the Himalayan mountains, which are always covered in snow. So the land is below, to the south of the Himalayas. So the land in between is called the Bharata. This name Bharata remains in use even today. In North India, it is generally written as Bharat, while in South India, it is often Bharatam. So, we use the name Bharata even today. Bharata, Bharat or Bharadam all mean India. In North India, we say Bharat and in South India, we use Bharatam. Have you identified these snowy mountains? Do you think this brief description of Bharata is correct? So, The snowy mountains mentioned here are the Himalayas, the very tall snow-covered mountains in the north of India. And what is the description saying? It says that Bharata lies south of the Himalayas and north of the ocean. So, India is really between the ocean and the snowy Himalayas. So, the description is correct because it matches the real location of India. It is interesting to note that different parts of the country adopted a similar definition for India. For instance, a poem of ancient Tamil literature from about 2000 years ago praises a king whose name is known from Cape Kumari in the south, from the Great Mountain in the north, from the oceans on the east and on the west. You can now recognize the Great Mountain in the north, and it should not be difficult to identify Cape Kumari. It looks like ancient Indians knew their geography well. So, different parts of India, even far away from each other, had a similar idea about the India's boundaries. For example, an ancient Tamil poem from about 2000 years ago talks about a king who was so famous and powerful that people knew his name across the entire land, from Cape Kumari in the south. That is the southernmost tip of India, from the Great Mountain in the north. It means the Himalayas. From the oceans of the east and on the west. That is Bay of Bengal on the east and Arabian Sea in the west. Meaning his fame is stretched far from one coast to the other. This shows that even thousands of years ago, people in different parts of India knew their country's geography very well. The Indian Constitution, which was first written in English, uses the phrase India, that is Bharat, right at the beginning. Similarly, the Hindi version of the Constitution mentions the same as Bharat Artat India. Constitution, a document that spells out the basic principles and laws of a nation. The Indian Constitution, which will be studied in grade 7, came into force in 1950. The Constitution is like the rule book for the whole country. The Indian Constitution is the special book of rules for India. It was started in 1950, which means from that year, India followed these rules. You will learn more about the Indian Constitution in grade 7. When it was first written, the Constitution used the phrase India, that is Bharat, in English. In the Hindi version, it says Bharat Artat India, which means Bharat means India. This shows that both names, India and Bharat, officially refer to a country. The Constitution uses both names, India and Bharat. So, whether someone says India or Bharat, they are talking about the same nation. In this reproduction of the first page of the original Constitution of India, in figure 5.5, page 82, can you make out the phrase India, that is Bharat? So, in this image of the first page of the original Constitution of India, we have to find the phrase India, that is Bharat. So, try to find the phrase India, that is Bharat in your book. How foreigners named India? The first foreigners to mention India were the Persians, the ancient inhabitants of Iran. In the 6th century BCE, a Persian emperor launched a military campaign and gained control of the region of the Indus River, which, as we saw, was earlier called Sindhu. So, it is no surprise that in their earliest records and stone inscriptions, the Persians referred to India as Hind, Hidu or Hindu, which are adaptations in their language of Sindhu. Note that in ancient Persian, Hindu is a purely geographical term. It does not refer here to the Hindu religion. So, the first foreigners to talk about India were the Persians, who lived in the area now we call Iran. Around the 6th century BCE, that is over 2000 years ago, a Persian king led an army and took control of the land near the Indus River. The Indus River was earlier called Sindhu by the people who lived there. Because of this, the Persian called India Hind, Hindu or Hindu in their language. These words come from Sindhu but sound different in Persian. Back then, Hindu was just a name for the land or region, not the religion we know today. Based on these Persian sources, the ancient Greeks named the region Indoi or Indic. They dropped the initial letter H of Hindu because this letter did not exist in their Greek language. The ancient Greeks got their information about India from the Persians. Because of this, the Greeks called the region Indoi or Indic. The Greeks dropped the first letter H from Hindu because the Greek language did not have the H sound at the beginning of words. So, Sindhu became Hindu, which became Indoi or Indic. The ancient Chinese also interacted with India. In several texts, they refer to India as Intu or Indu. This word also originally comes from Sindhu in the following manner. The ancient Chinese people also knew about India and wrote about it in their books. In their text, they call India Intu or Indu. This also comes from the old word Sindhu, which was another name for the Indus River. Just like the Persians and Greeks changed their word little, the Chinese changed Sindhu to Intu or Indu because of the way their language works. Xuanzang, formerly spelled Hyonsang, Xuanzang, etc., traveled from China to India in the 7th century CE. He visited many parts of India, met scholars, collected Buddhist texts, and returned to China after 17 years. There, he translated the manuscripts he took back with him from Sanskrit into Chinese. Several other Chinese scholars visited India over the centuries. Xuanzang was a famous traveler from China who visited India in the 7th century CE. He traveled all over India, met many scholars, and collected important Buddhist books. After spending 17 years in India, Xuanzang returned to China. He translated the books he brought back from Sanskrit into Chinese. He helped share Indian knowledge, especially about Buddhism, with China. Many other Chinese scholars also visited India in different times to learn and bring back knowledge. Another Chinese word also derived from Sindhu was Tianzu, but this word could also be understood as heavenly master. This reflects the respect the ancient Chinese had for India as the land of the Buddha. So, another ancient Chinese word for India was Tianzu. This word also comes from the old name Sindhu. But Tianzu can also mean heavenly master in Chinese. This shows how much the ancient Chinese respected India because it was the land where Buddha was born. You are probably quite familiar with the most recent term Hindustan, but you may not know that it was first used in a Persian inscription some 1800 years ago. Later on, this became the term used by most invaders of India to describe the Indian subcontinent. We all have heard the word Hindustan, but it was first used about 1800 years ago in Persian inscription. Later, many invaders who came to India also used the same Hindustan to talk about the whole Indian subcontinent. Can you complete this table of the many names of India? Here, for Latin, English and French it is given. We have to write the names of India which was used in other languages. So, we have already learned that in Persian, India was called Hind, Hindu or Hindu, which came from the word Sindhu. In Greek, Indoi, Indic, which came from the Persian Hindu, without the H sound. In Chinese, Hindu, Intu or Tianzu, from Sindhu, and Tianzu means heavenly master. In Arabic and Persian, Hindustan, which were used by Arab traders and Persian invaders. Before we move on, what we learned so far? India is an ancient land which has had many names in the course of its history. India is a very old country and has had many different names throughout its long history. The names given by the ancient inhabitants of India include Jambudvipa and Bharata. The latter became widespread in time and is the name of India in most Indian languages. The ancient people of India gave names like Jambudvipa and Bharata. Over time, the name Bharata became very popular and is still used in most Indian languages. Foreign visitors to or invaders of India mostly adopted names derived from the Sindhu or Indus River. This resulted in names like Hindu, Indoi, and eventually India. So, people who came from outside India, like visitors or invaders, mostly use names based on the Sindhu, that is Indus River. Because of this, names like Hindu, Indoi, and finally India came into use. We hope you enjoyed learning about our incredible India and how it got its name. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. See you soon in our next video. Bye bye.